First thing I want to say is Happy Mother's Day. If you haven't already, definitely go and show your mother some appreciation to really take a step back and realize where you came from and appreciate all the sacrifices and everything that your mom has given you. Other than that, let's jump straight into it. This is Trading with Artist and Will, and we will be looking at the week of May 12th. Now, as I'm recording this, the headline for the US-China negotiation deals have ended, and apparently it has been pretty amicable. The White House has also given us information that they will be giving a complete briefing on Monday, May 12th. So that's definitely the first thing and most important thing that you should be looking out for this week. And off of this news, futures opened up with a pretty big gap up. We're up 1.57% and clearly showing you that we're breaking this consolidation zone that it was in for a while. Most important thing to note is also that we are approaching the 200 simple moving average on the daily here for NQ. But if you go on the indices here, we're actually riding just right up against the 200 simple moving average here. So if you're bullish, you really want to see this gap up in futures hold so that we get this nice little gap up above the 200 simple moving average on SPY and QQQ. And then what we want to see intraday, hopefully, is a retest or some sort of that 200 as newfound support to then bounce and continue further. But the biggest thing we want to look at here is that NQ is approaching the huge rejection that we had on March 26th at around 20.5K here. So that's the next little pit stop that you really want to take a look at and see how price reacts there. Other than that, there's going to be 5 tickers that I really want to focus on this week. The first is going to be HIMS. Now, HIMS has had phenomenal strength recently, and what I want to see is a nice continuation right under this level. So we just recently gap filled here. If you go on the 4-hour time frame, we had a nice little gap fill from 46.5 all the way to around $49. And then at the wick of this candle, right after earnings from February, is at 52.72. So we're kind of just taking a little pit stop, showing some resistance here. There's a lot of sellers present here, as you can see on these 2 4-hour candles where we wicked above it. But as always, the more times a resistance point gets whittled down, the more likely that the next time it's actually going to break and we continue in the trend that the stock is actually going towards. And so that's what these arrows are trying to represent. I want to see a nice little break above this with a high volume push. We retest that level, reestablish new support, let buyers and sellers agree at that higher point so we make it a higher low and we continue forward. We actually have another really nice gap fill starting from around $57 all the way up to 64. And this is just on the 4-hour time frame, right? Like if you go on the daily here, looks really good, consolidation, shows that price wants to tighten before another move. And then the weekly time frame here, just super bullish here. This is no doubt likely going to test the all-time highs relatively soon here. The second name is going to be Spotify here. I want to show you guys the weekly time frame here. Just look at this. We had a earnings candle break of this trend line and showing that there's phenomenal strength after earnings, and now we're just sitting right under this all-time high level at around 653. We actually broke past this level a few days, but we failed to hold above it, but we're still above this 8 EMA on the daily time frame. When it shows that this 8 EMA is being used as support here, it's tapped it here, and it's tapped it on this most recent Friday. This shows you that the stock likely wants to continue trending higher. Now, the biggest thing for Spotify is that because it's a large cap tech company, we want to see large caps get some momentum for the rest of the week for this name to continue forward. But on the weekly time frame here, it looks really, really good. I definitely think we're going to be breaking this all-time high level. This newly made at 664. I really do think we're going to test around 700, maybe even higher from here in the next coming weeks. The third name is going to be Tesla here. I am in a position already, but I would love to get more positioning on it, especially if we can get a retest of this 295 area. Now, this 295 was a pretty big resistance point for this week or so of consolidation. This is that range it was trading in from 270 to 294, but we finally managed to break that on Friday of May 9th. And the biggest thing you want to see is that we had declining volume as we consolidated in this range to tell you that sellers were not really that dominant. And even though buyers weren't that present, it shows you that buyers and sellers agree on the price of Tesla around this range. Even though it's a big range, it's still definitely playable. The most important thing to note is also that on Friday, as we broke this resistance line at 295, we had a lot of volume here. And the next point of contention is definitely this 303 area, which is where we wicked on Friday. But if we manage to break this, I definitely think we can test around 325 and maybe even further from here. So the biggest thing I want to see is if we can get another retest of around 295 here and to build more consolidation and tighten to maybe see something like this happen, reestablish some more support, let price catch up, and then eventually break higher further past this 303 point. The fourth name is going to be RIVN here. I think RIVN is a good sympathy play and confluence with Tesla. Seeing how they're both EVs and they actually move pretty similarly. Like look at Friday volume here, as well as the candle. We wicked past this most recent resistance point at around 14.5, but we closed under it. Go back to Tesla here, eerily very similar candle here. So I want to see this very similar type of action. RIVN actually looks pretty nice because it hasn't actually fully broken out yet. Once we actually get a daily close above this 14.5 level is when I'll be convinced that this breakout is going to have a lot of momentum and continuation is definitely possible. If we go on the weekly time frame here, we're actually starting to flip the EMAs too. When the EMAs get flipped, the shorter time frames overlap above the longer time frames. That's when you know that the trend is likely starting to change, sentiment is changing for this name, and it's starting to point a little bit more bullish here. Last but not least is going to be Dutch Bros here, ticker BROS. I think it's really nice. So we had another post-earnings great reaction where we broke past this 64 level off of this wick on this candle, which shows you there's a lot of strength. We actually tried to close above it, but then on Friday we ended up printing an inside day. Kind of looks like a flag to me if I'm being honest. And again, very similar to RIVN on the weekly time frame where the shorter dated EMAs were starting to curl up. On the daily time frame here, we're starting to see the 8 EMA. I have orange as my 8 EMA. Is curling and we're actually trying to reclaim all of them. So I have the 21 and the 50, that's going to be the blue and then the purple. We're starting to flip all of them, which indicates there's a big sentiment shift, especially when there's a catalyst with the earnings report that's out of the way. This name could easily start flipping this trend and start continuing upwards with more momentum. So what I really want to see is a break of this flag here above 65 to take a position and then target likely around $70 and further from there. Other than that, another good contender that's not on the list is going to be Robin here. This is on the weekly time frame. We're pushing up against this 54.62 resistance line based off the March 3rd candle here when we sold off really hard. And we're starting to see this kind of doji here. So this tells me it's a little bit weak. I think this might indicate some weakness, maybe some consolidation. I don't think we're going to pull back fully back to around like the low 50s here. I think what's going to happen is we're likely going to stay above this candle gap up. So around 51.75. I don't think we're going to break that low and likely consolidate just right under this 54 resistance area. And then what we want to see is some type of flag get printed here, right? We want to see something like this happen. And if we're able to see something like this would mean price is tightening right under this line. And then eventually what we want to see is a heavy push with volume to break past this to show you and signal to you that this is actually a real breakout. That's it for my end for this week of May 12th. Honestly, the biggest thing to worry about is to see how this briefing goes on Monday and how comprehensive this deal is with US and China and how the market will take it. The biggest thing to note is that cryptocurrencies might have just front ran this move and we want to see what happens here. Bitcoin is not really reacting that well here. We haven't really broken these highs and we're actually selling off a bit. So that's the one kind of red flag in terms of this rally. It would be really bad if this gap up in the futures just gets completely sold off overnight into Monday. But other than that, take it day by day and then go from there.